Welcome everyone. I would like to, on behalf of Jito and Jito Professional Forum, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you for this inaugural session of JPF iBox, which is being organized by the Jito Professional Forum JPF and the Jito Youth Wing. First, I would just like to go over a few of instructions for the event. Uh, the participants shall not be allowed to unmute to have the uninterrupted flow of conversation by the speakers. The chat shall be open only to the host during the speech, and for any questions to be asked during the Q&A, please write in the chat box. The chat for all shall be open 1 minute prior to the Q&A. Participants shall not be allowed to rename themselves during the event. A feedback form link shall be floated during the event. Everyone is requested to fill in the same. Everyone is requested to follow these instructions for the smooth functioning of the event. Should we now go on with Dheerajji's speech, or should we wait for probably a few minutes?
I think let's just wait. There are a few. We've got the core committee also national from the National Youth Wing. We've got Sunanda Jain, who's the vice chairman from Chennai, who's the vice chairman of the National Youth Wing. We've got Siddharth Jain, who's also the vice chairman from Milwada. We've got Rinkle Pagaria, who's the secretary of the National Youth Wing, and we've got Mitesh Jain, who's the treasurer of the Youth Wing. So on and all, we've also got the zone conveners. Like I think the whole National Youth Working Committee today is here for this particular event. It's a good thing that all of you guys have joined. So kudos to all of you. And yes, so I think we should start in about a minute. Or Ajay, can we start?
Yeah, sure.
Yes,
with the prayers.
For the prayers, we can start with the prayer first.
Sure.
Please. Or should we wait for Mr. Munjal once he joined in then?
No, we can then start with the prayers.
So, are you guys excited to witness something big tonight? So, I'm sure I am. Now, let's start the event. I would first like to request Mr. Dheeraj Chajir, who is the chairman of the Jito Youth Wing, to address the audience.
Thank you, Harshita. Jai Jinendra. Good evening to all the people joining from India, and good morning to the people joining from the other countries. I hope you're all safe and healthy. This is our second event with JPF, and what a number we've achieved already today. I think we've got more than 500 people, and I'm sure it will increase as the event progresses. So speaking about the Jito Youth Wing, we've increased our membership strength from 2,700 members to 6,500 in 52 cities and 8 countries as of now. Just like how we have JPF Youth Project for professionals, we also have 9 more projects specially designed for youth on the objectives of achieving economic empowerment, knowledge, and growth. We've got Innovation E-Cell for entrepreneurship and startups, JBN for increasing business with our vast network, where we've already done business worth 75 crores amongst the youth. We've got Jito National Youth Academy for developing skills in these challenging times, where we recently just launched 3 courses with the Harvard University. We've got Jito Expedia, where we provide experiential learning through industrial visits and youth exchange. Jito Internpreneurs, where we provide internships in top corporate companies. Jito Sports and Talent Academy for nurturing talent in youth. Jitology for empowering Jains through our minority status and helping the country in pandemic-like situation by the way of providing assistance in arranging a plasma, oxygen cylinder, etc. through our Devote to Donate campaign. And of course, connecting all the youth via digital platforms through our Jito project. So our youth wing till today, all the chapter leaders have done about 160 plus events in various cities in just 5 months till now. So all credit goes to the team. Today's event is one such event where, along with JPF, we are trying to impart knowledge to our members about big and disruptive ideas for youth, for us to learn and implement in our business. Let me tell you, friends, Jito is the only community organization clearly focusing on knowledge, business, and growth. So I request all of you to join our network, and let's all together create an impact for our community at large. A special thank you to our esteemed speakers, Professor Ramesh Raskar from MIT Boston, and Mr. Naveen Munjal from Hilo Electric. I want to also thank each one of you for taking out time today and attending our event. I assure you that this session is going to be of immense value for all of us. If you want to attend such events in future and be a part of Jito, then please fill in the form and also follow our social media pages, which would be sent in the chat box. So thank you once again, and I'm looking forward for this amazing session.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dheeraj, for your kind words and enlightening us about the Jito Youth Wing and its projects. Now, I would like to call Mr. Ajay Bora, Chairman of the Jito Professional Forum, to enlighten us about the JPF iBox, introduce our speakers, and moderate the event further.
Thank you, Harshitaji. What a pleasure it is to really be with everyone this evening. We have already crossed 670 participants, so it's because of the goodwill, the work done, and also the pedigree of the speakers that we have today. With that, as you all know, Jito Professional Forum is a vertical of Jito, which focuses on doctors, lawyers, architects, company secretaries, chartered accountants, bankers, and salaried corporate executives. Now, in our mentoring program, which Jito Professional Forum undertakes, we have mentors which include senior corporate executives from organizations such as Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Visa, IBM, American Express, GE Power, LinkedIn, Accenture, Morgan Stanley, and many others. So you can look forward to being the mentees and benefit or take advantage of these esteemed mentors that Jito Professional Forum has put together. It's for our growth. So it will be important that you can avail that benefit. Also, now speaking about today's program, in this disruptive and uncertain world that we live in today, big ideas matter. Preparing for big ideas, which consequently lead to big opportunities, can open various doors for the future. JPF iBox is one such initiative of Jito Professional Forum in partnership with Jito Youth Wing, where we plan to bring in thought leaders who can open our minds to emerging trends and limitless opportunities. Inspired by TED Talk format, JPF iBox is crisp and focused. Just 60 minutes of listening, interacting, and learning. The format is such that each speaker will speak for 15 minutes, followed by 15 minutes of questions and answer session, and we'll end the program after 60 minutes. Now let's get started. What an honor it is to launch JPF iBox with a mentor. He's a mentor to me personally as well, and a globally acclaimed scientist and professor of MIT, who's the inspiration to the world. He has just recently been awarded Scientist of the Year by the Society of Imaging Science and Technology. He is none other than Dr. Ramesh Raskar. It's a privilege to have you with us, Dr. Raskar. And he joined by Mr. Naveen Munjal of Hero EV, who brings in a different dimension in today's launch of JPF iBox. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's tighten our seatbelts for an exciting ride of 60 minutes. Over to you, Dr. Raskar. Aditi ji, if you can please put up the share screen, please. If you can share screen and have the PowerPoint on the screen.
Would I start sharing the screen?
Yes, please.
Yes, please. Thank you, Ajay, and what an honor to be with you all. Have interacted with Jito in the past, and your commitment to knowledge, impact, and business is fantastic. Today we are in a very difficult scenario, especially in India, with respect to the COVID crisis. So I'm going to share some big ideas on how we can do crowdsourcing, how we can self-coordinate and improve citizen engagement. Because when you think about how the East Asian countries managed to tame the pandemic is they did basically social engineering. They did very invasive data collection of everybody's activities, and they used very coercive. Now, many democratic countries, this would not be the right thing to do. So in Western democracies, like the US and the Europe, we basically said, science will save us. And we said, till we have vaccines, there's nothing we can do. And Europe and US paid a very heavy cost. In India, we're not choosing, or we are not looking at relying on billions of dollars of investment on firefighting. And so these three approaches, social engineering, virtual interventions versus firefighting, all of them have pluses and minuses. But maybe the best hybrid is some kind of crowdsourcing. So let me tell you about Path Check, which is a foundation we spun out as volunteers on it. A tornado, you see that through, satellite imagery. If you can go to the next slide, please. And that's enough to get an early warning system of, a tornado coming, on from the Arabian Sea. When you think about, so there's a notion of sensing, and then we, kind of enforce people's behavior. If you think about the pandemic, the H1N1 pandemic about 10 years ago, we were able to also do some kind of a surveillance and then enforce people's behavior. Today, I think the right tool for us is to use the smartphones as our sensing network. And then instead of enforcing, we have to create engagement platforms to do this. And if you use any software product, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or whatever, they figure out how to nudge us in the right direction, right? So the smartphones are actually the tool to deal with such big problems. Next slide. So imagine there is Babu. He's a immigrant in Mumbai. Doesn't have the papers. At some point he gets exposed. At some point he starts getting symptoms. Then he starts kind of resting, isolating at home. He goes and buys some medicines at the local pharmacy, and maybe he even gets vaccinated. Now, this journey for Babu in Mumbai, who's lowly paid, daily wage, doesn't have papers, doesn't have documents, his journey is completely invisible to the public health. It's completely invisible to a digital system, and that leads to gaps in public health knowledge. Next slide. So if you want to create this loop of testing, tracing, vaccinating, predicting what the next challenge is going to be, alerting people, the government and public health tries its best, but there are so many gaps in these activities because we are just flying blind. And that leads to a catastrophic failure in responding to a pandemic. So any planning is missing, and any engagement with citizens is also missing. Next slide. So a new trend in healthcare is actually tapping the data directly from the consumers. So in any AI and data problem, there are three parts. How do you capture, how do you analyze, and how do you engage? And so if we can directly interface with the citizens, then we can actually close the loop and fill in the gaps. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what it means in terms of making a social impact, and also some of the business opportunities if we have this mindset for healthcare. Next slide. Now, the big challenge is that if you want to collect data from individuals, then you could be like Google or Facebook and have some kind of a brand, so people willingly give away their information. But when it comes to sensitive data like financial data or health data, people are very concerned about privacy. And health departments simply will not deploy a solution where the data is getting misused. So solving privacy is very critical to achieve this crowdsourcing. And the solution for that is some technology we have invented at MIT, and others are working on this as well, is called no peek privacy, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So next slide. So we all use Google Maps or Waze or Apple Maps to look at traffic, and the reason why we can see traffic ahead of us is because people ahead of us are sharing their GPS location with Google or Apple, and from that we can understand the traffic density and see whether there's too much traffic and start taking a detour. So this traffic management apps, this navigation apps is a great example. Like you might be in a city that has really good roads and really good traffic lights and so on, but still you end up using these apps to navigate because we think the government, the transportation departments are just not capable enough to provide a real-time information on how to deal with traffic. And this is true all over the world, by the way, right? But the one interesting thing about Apple Maps, as opposed to other map software, is that in Apple Maps, if you go from point A to point B, let's say you drive from Mumbai to Nasik, then Apple doesn't know where you started from, where you're going, and what route you took, as opposed to other software. And the problem with, even if you're using a weather app, if you're using social media app, unfortunately, they're sucking up all this data from your phone of all your location, all your trajectory, and they're doing all kinds of nasty things. It could be as simple as targeting you with advertisement, but that's the lowest of your problem. But they could be sucking up your data to define your credit rating. It can lead to discrimination in jobs. It can lead to identity breach and credit breach, all the way out to it could be a national security issue if you're if you're a nuclear scientist or a politician whose location trails are being shared with a foreign country. So Apple is able to provide this service using this no peek principles in a privacy preserving way. And this is a very important piece of new healthcare systems. So that's why I wanted to emphasize this notion of no peek. Next slide. So in healthcare, when we think about privacy, we almost always, let's go to the next slide. We almost always think about solutions based on consent or anonymization. But this is not good enough because, as you know, there's always a data breach and that can create problems. But with no peek privacy that you see on the slide, it turns out that you can create a solution where no data is shared. So as I showed in the Apple Maps, nobody, not even Apple, knows your location. And so for the new healthcare consumer-facing software, we have a piece of technology where the company does not know anything about the users and can still provide all the services. Okay, so this is the new trend in big data, and in the context of pandemic, is it's becoming more and more obvious. Next slide. So so about a year ago, let's go to the next slide. About a year ago, I launched the very first kind of a concept. Sorry, let's go to the previous slide. For contact tracing. And the benefit of contact tracing is that it can create an early warning system of have you crossed path with somebody else. It was the first app we launched, the first algorithm we wrote, first paper we wrote. And then we started getting calls from all over the world, including from India, including the team that eventually built the Arogya Setu app. So I was in the founding team of Arogya Setu. But at MIT, we spun off this nonprofit called PathCheck Foundation, and we raised a few $1 million for this nonprofit. And we launched solutions in many parts of the world, including in the US. So we're the official app in certain US states. So it has become the world's largest privacy-preserving open source nonprofit for COVID-19, and our work continues. And we would love to have many of the folks on this call here who are interested in big data or technology or healthcare to join our foundation. It's completely open, and I'll put the links to the Slack channel, tiny.cc/pathcheck/Slack. Next slide. So we're very proud to launch this nonprofit and start working on these initiatives. And the way we work is we, as a nonprofit, we create free software that anybody in the world can go deploy. If you're a software company in healthcare, you can go and deploy our solution. And then as a nonprofit, we just charge for consulting and advising and any maintenance and things like that. And with that, we have been able to make about $1 million in revenue, even though everything we provide is free. Next slide. So over the next 3 years, we want to kind of create these free open source tools and work with health partners all over the world and deploy these free solutions, right, to get them going. And the local partners in those regions deploy these high-end solutions. Next slide. And so we already have planned pilots in many parts of the world. Next slide. In Nigeria, Brazil. Next slide. In Mumbai, in Alabama. Next slide. And then companies like Pfizer and patients like me who have kind of pioneered some of these ideas of using big data for digital health. Let's go to the next slide. So the interesting part here is that we have Babu, who is going through his pandemic journey, but as I said, he's invisible to the public health system, and that's what leads to failed response, poor coordination. On the other hand, imagine if there's Anna, she's a public health planner, maybe a researcher, maybe a public health leader, and she needs to know how the disease is spreading. What's the sickness map? What medicines are effective? Right now, there's a run on remdesivir and so on, which we know have nothing to do with curing COVID-19. I mean, you need remdesivir only if you are in the hospital. Stocking it at home is completely meaningless. And also equity. Are we doing a good job in making sure the technology we're deploying is good for poor people who don't have smartphones, people who don't understand technology, people who are illiterate, may not understand specific language. We need solutions that work as well, because when it comes to pandemic, is the people who have least power, are at most risk. And if we can make sure we control the pandemic amongst this underprivileged population, then it benefits everybody as well. So next slide. So how does it work? So we have to make sure that the capture, analysis, and engagement with individuals is very critical. So if you are familiar with Arogya Setu, which is also based on our platform, it has this notion of, hey, it's capturing some information about you, it's analyzing it in the back end, and it's trying to engage with you as well. But how can you do this at scale and in a privacy-preserving way so that people are willing to share more and more information with the platform? Next slide. So I'm going to zip through these slides very quickly, so I'll just talk very quickly. So for capture, we want to learn something from the app, as well as externally, your medical background, your age group, and so on. Next slide. And then, when Babu is going for tests and his vaccination status, we want to capture that in the app as well. Next slide. If Babu has his symptoms, he has a calendar in the green in the second picture here, he's doing well, his situation worsens, it gets very bad. So we can see that, like, how's any city performing? What treatments is he taking? Are they working for him or not working for him? Next slide. And then for contact tracing, based on GPS or Bluetooth, is he getting exposed? If he's exposed, can we inform everybody else in his network that, hey, Babu was post-tested positive, and if you come in contact, please get yourself tested or rest at home, and so on, right? So as you can imagine, this is pretty invasive information we want to capture from Babu. Next slide. And then in the back end for this healthcare system, we also want to analyze, right, and do a network analysis of what's going on. So Anna, she's the public health leader. Next slide. Needs to see with our software, how the sickness is spreading, how the disease is spreading, what could be the hotspots, what treatments are effective. Like right now, for example, in the pandemic, we have so many unknowns compared to the pandemic in 2020. Why are younger people getting affected? Why do so many people need oxygenation? Which medicines are working or not working? Is it impacting men or is it impacting women? if you have somebody sick in one house, how many people in the same house are also getting sick, and so on. We need that information to have any reasonable pandemic response. So for example, if we figure out that the current virus is mostly impacting people in the age group of 30 to 50, then our vaccination strategy will change altogether. We'll say, forget about everybody else. Let's just vaccinate people between 30 to 50. But we don't know that. And without that scientific information, we're just vaccinating everybody, which may not be, the most important thing to do. Next slide. And then in a democratic setting, the most important challenge is how do you engage people? How do you tell them you should stay home? If you get sick, let us know. If your medicines are working or not working, do this. We have this scheme where we'll give you 500 rupees. If you are tested positive, if you have to stay home, we want to, like, how do you engage? There's so much misinformation on WhatsApp and platforms. How do you get rid of misinformation? So all these things need to be solved with engagement as well. So next slide. So it's important for Babu to get this information in the app in a privacy preserving way. His risk score, his symptom trajectory. Next slide. He needs to see highly personalized information of what's relevant to him for his own town, for his own neighborhood, for his own health condition. I don't want to read 50 different websites and rely on misinformation I'm seeing on WhatsApp. I want to say, listen, I'm 35 years old, I have a fever, and this is my medical condition in my family. What should I do? All information should just appear directly to Babu. And this is the future of healthcare, right? Because of AI and big data. Next slide. So a few slides on technology. I'm just going to skip over that, but we can come back to it during question and answer. So let's go to the next slide. So kind of this idea of no peak privacy and personalized engagement is based on 4 major technology trends. One is called on-device computation. Second is called secure multi-party computation for privacy-preserving techniques. Third is called differential privacy, which is how do you add noise. And the fourth is this notion of federated learning or split learning, which is invented in our group at MIT. So using this new set of techniques, healthcare is going through a major transformation. So I'm going to skip the next 4 slides. If you can just step through that. You can just skip the next 4 slides. And I'll make these slides available to you. One more slide. Next slide. And so finally, we want to also think about, how do we solve these problems for vulnerable population? If you can go back 1 slide. So as I said, people who don't have smartphones, people who don't understand technology, may not even understand the language, we need solutions that are purely based on a paper card. So what we have done is we have designed, a series of solutions just based on paper cards, and they have very secure kind of QR codes that are cryptographically signed. So they cannot be spoofed. You can almost treat it like cash, digital cash. And so by using this technique, we have techniques that work on feature phones using SMS and things like that. So collection of these techniques, allows us to think about how to deal with challenges in healthcare. Next slide. So of course, I'm very proud of our team leaders at the PathCheck Foundation, and I said 3,000 plus professional volunteers. So a significant chunk of them actually come from India, from some of the top organizations that work with us. So we really welcome you to deal with this. Next slide. So if I really think about, to conclude, to really think about how healthcare is transforming, the 3 major trends that I mentioned. One is this notion of consumerization of health, which is how do we eliminate the middleman and directly, big companies are going to provide solutions to consumers directly. Just like e-commerce has, transformed the way, there's a direct relationship between a seller and a buyer. In the same way, we have changed the relationship with media. As opposed to watching TVs and so on, this direct relationship with consumer, the same trend is appearing in healthcare. So crowdsourcing is one. The second major trend is that to achieve that crowdsourcing, we need solutions that exploit big data and AI. And this is the given. But the third trend, which is very critical, very subtle, is that the solution has to be privacy preserving. That means, how do you extract and harness highly sensitive information like health from everybody while maintaining privacy and still creating a very personalized engagement? So, I explained to you these three major trends: consumerization, big data and AI, and privacy in the context of this pandemic. But thanks to this pandemic, for good or for bad, these ideas are going to become widespread in society and in business. And this reliance we have had in dealing with a crisis only with firefighting, which is going to the hospital only after you have a heart attack, is a bad thing. We know prevention is better, and we know some other pharmaceutical measurements well before you get a heart attack is better. So I think in a country like a middle-income country like India, we do not have the luxury of spending tens of billions of dollars to invest in buying up vaccines, even if they're useful, or just stocking up. At the same time, we don't have the luxury of highly authoritarian regimes to use coercive social engineering to enforce laws. But what we can do in democracies in middle-income countries like India is use big data and AI to get kind of a God's eye view on what's going on, and at the same time create very clever mechanism with personal engagement. So I hope you'll join me on this journey to deal with this pandemic using privacy-preserving crowdsourcing and citizen engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Raskar. It's really great to hear from you, and you have shared a lot of thought-provoking ideas. Now, if I can just get started, a lot of questions are coming in, but the first one, you had talked about consumerization of health. So is it possible for you to share some of the examples of how disintermediation is happening? As you have said, you have given the analogy of e-commerce, like it is going directly from the manufacturer to the consumers. In similar way, if you can share some examples of how consumerization of health is happening.
Yeah, there are several trends. I mean, you know about telemedicine. Telemedicine is able to disintermediate a lot of the friction that we have before. The other one, of course, an obvious one, parallel to e-commerce, is direct to home medicine delivery, right? I mean, that can completely transform the world of corner pharmacies and corner convenience stores. The third major trend is diagnostics, telediagnostics. So right now, on my Apple Watch, I can see in fraction of a second whether my ECG is healthy or not. But we're going to see more of that in real time. It's not like you have to make an appointment and show up, 1 day later, and the doctor can just see you for 10 minutes and figure out something. But you're going to have this continuous measurements that are moving around. And of course, probably the biggest trend in consumerization of health is devices that are available in our house. So whether it's our smartphone, whether it's our Amazon Alexa.
Your voice is breaking a bit, Dr. Raskar. Dr. Raskar, your voice is, we are unable to hear you.
Yeah. Whether it's our IoT devices, they are becoming an interface to us. So let's take a concrete example. I have a 6-year-old daughter here at home, and I have an Amazon Alexa.
We are losing
Can you hear me now?
We are losing you intermittently, Dr. Raskar. Yeah. Yes, so if you don't mind, because it's a very interesting example you are citing. So you said that we have devices at home. There onwards, if you don't mind repeating, and you were giving one example also.
Yeah. So imagine, my 6-year-old, wakes up, with her coughing and sneezing, and I have to make a decision. Should I take her to the doctor, or can she go to the school? And imagine my Amazon Alexa says, hey, I asked Amazon Alexa, hey, what should I do? And Alexa says, hey, I've been listening to your daughter all night long, and she coughs and sneezes about 10 times, this night. And yesterday night, she only coughed, a couple of times. So clearly something is getting worse. Let me check with all her classmates to see what's going on. And Alexa very quickly checks everybody else's coughing and sneezing in her classroom. She says, oh, out of the 30 students in her class, about 15 of them are also coughing and sneezing for the last couple of days. That means something is going on in the school. It's not, and I checked, your daughter's seasonal allergies, and it turns out on May 5th of last year in Boston, she did not have any seasonal allergies. So it doesn't sound like a seasonal allergy. It sounds like there's something going on in the school. So this would be something we should look at. And then Alexa says, do you want me to just connect you to a telemedicine doctor who's in the Amazon network? Or do you want me to book a Ola or Uber for you so you can go take the day off and take your daughter, go see a doctor in person? And I'm going to be completely blown away and say to Alexa, like, no, connect me to an Amazon telemedicine doctor right now. And I'm done with it in 5 minutes, right?
Oh.
So this consumer, like the things I talked about, consumerization, about disintermediation, telemedicine, big data, and privacy are all kind of embedded in this example of how we might see healthcare evolving in the future.
Wow. This was truly amazing. And I think it looks like what we see in the movies is already here. So
it's already here.
Yes.
We just need great entrepreneurs on this call to tap into it.
So perfect. Yeah, sure. And since you mentioned that, Dr. Raskar, now we have a lot of entrepreneurs and the youth thing, plus we have Jito Incubation Center and the Angel Network, the investors also. So to maybe draw upon or to derive some ideas from what you just described, these are power ideas and emerging trends which are so profound in nature. So would you know of any startups which really leverage these concepts and try to create something, just in terms of the glimpse of what it can be, or something you might have seen on the similar lines in terms of business ventures or the startups?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at a company like Livongo, which is,
how do you spell that, Dr. Raskar? Livongo?
Yeah, I think it's Livango.
Livongo, okay.
Yeah, it's a great company. Some of the MIT people are part of the company, and it's an example where they said, let's just look at treatment of diabetes, which, as you know, is very, very cumbersome for people who do have diabetes. And they said, let's just create a direct-to-consumer solution where you can upload your results. They'll give you a device that you can keep at home to measure your blood glucose, and they'll just create your whole plan for you. And most people say, you know what, I'm willing to pay $20 a month for a company that's just going to keep track of my diabetes and give me, engagement and encouragement and, latest trends and latest research. And, because my doctors may be great, but they don't know anything more than what I can read online anyway. So that's an example of a very good one. And in telemedicine, of course, there are great companies coming up. Teladoc is, a US-based company, TELLADOC, just telephone doc. Again, multi-billion-dollar companies in this space. But even companies like Apple and Google are spending, a lot of energy into it. You probably heard, Tim Cook say in public that he wants Apple 100 years from now. He wants to be remembered for Apple as a company that transformed health and healthcare.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Okay.
And as you know, I was in the Apple team. I took a leave from MIT and I was in the Apple team. And there are 50 doctors, medical doctors that work at Apple. And I was also took a leave and I started the health innovation team at Facebook, the company in California. So I started health innovation team at a company called Facebook. Now you would say, what does Facebook have to do with health? So we're going to see some really great transformations kind of in this space, or consumerization.
Sure. Outstanding. I think what you have said is, while answering these questions, you have highlighted many other mega trends like subscription-based healthcare, one engagement. So it's not just healthcare delivery like transactional, one goes to the doctors, takes the medicine or gets treated, but an engagement and also a holistic solution where the instruments which or the devices which can be with the patients and the startups can come around not only just to create those devices, but to offer like a solution where the mega trend consumerization of health that you talked about, these are the avenues in which the entrepreneurs can build their ventures. So that's really enlightening. Very,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, amazing to know. Now, one question. Yeah, please go ahead. Yes.
I just wanted to, yeah, Ajay, I just wanted to kind of emphasize on the point you made about, for entrepreneurs, yes, what is the training ground? Like, where do you start? Because you're not a Facebook or a Google on day one, right? Yes. So where do you start? And, as you know, I have started many companies, for venture, for profit ventures. Yes. And when I was thinking about responding to this pandemic, I was kind of thinking about, should we start a nonprofit? Should we start a for-profit? And we said, let's start a nonprofit because it's going to create this horizontal platform. And we attracted a lot of entrepreneurs who joined PathCheck Foundation, many CEOs and CTOs. And what we're doing is we are using the pandemic as a platform to deploy solutions that can be used right away. But then many people come to PathCheck and say, hey, this is how you do a venture in health tech using AI and big data and software and new delivery mechanism and hyper local delivery and e-commerce and so on. And all those entrepreneurs that are engaged with PathCheck are starting their own companies. So we have many spin-offs from PathCheck Foundation that are coming up. So and again, it's an open platform. It's like just like Linux or think about your favorite open platform. So you're welcome to kind of join PathCheck and treat that as an incubation ground. Build your team, look at the opportunities, take the free software, and go launch your own company.
Wow, what an amazing thing! And Dr. Raskar, having worked with Apple and seeing that Apple now, no one would have imagined, but they have a team of doctors. Facebook has it, and your own startup which you are pioneering. And you have also, you have been nice enough to say that Jito Youth Wing members can partner with that, or even Jito members, and can really be a part of that movement and create ventures on their own. That's an amazing, presentation and your contribution to this. We feel like this session should continue on, and we should keep learning from you. However, keeping the sanctity of the program, if we want to take one assurance from you that we look forward to hearing, our team would look forward to hearing from you in the near future as per your convenience. And if you, we have not done justice to your wisdom, so look forward to seeing you sometime in the future, if it's okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Wonderful to be here, and all the best for your ventures and making an impact in this pandemic.
Sure. Thank you, Doctor. And while you were speaking, we had crossed 950. So it's one of the records that we have had here. Thank you, Dr. Raskar, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then over to now, let's go back to our next speaker in this series at JPF launch, which is who needs no introduction again. Hero is the brand that we all know. He is the managing director of Hero EV. Please welcome Mr. Naveen Munjal. Mr. Munjal, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ajay. Thank you so much, Jito, for having me here today. It's an absolute pleasure. I hope all of you are well and all your families are well. So I'm going to start with the presentation, which I'm just going to share right now.
Yes.
I hope that's visible.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So I'm going to jump straight into it since I have a short time, 15 minutes for the presentation. And then I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Sure.
So just to give you a perspective on electric mobility, we've been in this space now for a number of years. We've been here for about 14 odd years. And in that time, we've sold about 350,000 vehicles. And this is just some statistics of how much carbon emissions have been saved since by the introduction of our electric scooters in this market over the last 13, 14 years. Now, when we look at electric mobility, every report that you read worldwide, every research that you read, essentially is talking about cars. But in a country like India, it's not necessarily the cars which are going to lead the way. It's actually going to be the smaller vehicles for various reasons. And when we look at electric mobility, we've got to actually divide it up into different baskets or different categories. So there's electric two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, and commercial vehicles or public transport. All of them have different needs in terms of different factors. So price parity for two-wheelers, for example, between electric and IC is almost there now. And I'll show you my chart later. For three-wheelers is also almost there, but for cars, it's still quite low. in terms of commercial vehicles is still quite low. Performance is for electric versus IC is medium in the case of two-wheelers and cars. But when it comes to three-wheelers, it's actually high. And when it comes to commercial vehicles, again, it's high because I'm looking at intercity commercial vehicles. In terms of the infrastructural needs, for two-wheelers is very low, because you could actually effectively charge at home, go to your workplace and come back. And the distance traveled, even in a large city like Delhi or Mumbai or Bangalore, is only about 20 kilometers a day. It's not more than that. But when it comes to cars, the infrastructure requirement is very, very high because you need that charging infrastructure. You may or may not have the charging infrastructure at home, and you should not be constrained by range anxiety. So in terms of emissions, in terms of technological advancements and conversion to EV, we believe that the low-hanging fruit is actually going to be the two-wheelers. That is where the base of the pyramid is going to be. That said, this is a chart. I'm going to talk more about two-wheelers here, since 80% of the vehicles on the road in India are two-wheelers. But these two charts that I'm showing you are actually more to do with cars. So when you look at an electric car versus an IC engine, it is actually simpler. The electric car is simpler. They are smarter, and they are more powerful because there's less friction that is there. There are less moving parts. So when you look at the life of the vehicle, electric is better. When you look at the power of the vehicle, the torque and the speed, electric is better due to the factors I just told you. And when you look at the experience, that is also much better, because when you look at when you consider vibration and when you consider the whole experience of it, there's less vibration, there's less noise, it is less taxing on you. When you look at the factors, compare the equal performance of an electric versus IC, electric vehicles at this point of time are anything about 1.8 to 2.2 times more expensive than that of an IC engine vehicle. But when you consider the TCO, the total cost of ownership over a period of time, it could be 1/5 to 1/10 that of an IC engine vehicle. The technological advancements that are happening in electric vehicles are far superior to what is happening in the IC engine category now. Globally, a number of companies have already announced that they will not be deploying any more R&D capital in development of IC engine vehicles any longer. This is to show you how quickly disruption can happen. On the left is Fifth Avenue, New York, 1900, and on where you can see a sea of horse carriages, and there's one car there. So it's spot the car actually in the left image. And on the right side is the same street 13 years later. All you can see is cars there. There's one horse carriage there. So in 13 years, that whole disruption, the whole market shifted from a horse carriage to actually cars. This is way back in 1900 and 1913. Now, why is it time for electric mobility now? For one factor, the batteries are following a Moore's curve. So which means that every year, the performance of the battery is improving, the prices are dropping. In the last 10 years, since 2010, prices have dropped by about 85%. So they've gone from about $1,200 down to about $160 odd right now per kilowatt hour. Even though there are projections which talk about this price dropping down to about $75 or even $60, we, for our calculations, have only taken about $110 in the next couple of years. And then technology is going to shift. There's going to be change of technology that happens. Pollution is a very, very big driving factor. We all know that. This is an image of India Gate on the right side in winter and in summer. And in winter, it is actually smogged in. 15 out of the top 15 most polluted cities, 12 are in India, and out of which 5 are actually this NCR region that we are in. There are numerous policies which are pushing electric mobility through in India. So we started off with NEMMP in 2012, then we went into FAME 1 in 2015, and now FAME 2 in 2019. In terms of the amounts allocated for these policies, just to give you a perspective, in FAME 1, it was 890 crores, and in FAME 2 is 10,000 crores. Now that is for the central policy. Besides the central policies, there are also a number of state policies. So Delhi's got one, Karnataka has got, Tamil Nadu's got, Gujarat is coming up with theirs, and Punjab is coming up with theirs, etc. And the list just goes on. Majority of these policies actually are more production linked, barring Delhi, which is more demand linked. So when you buy a vehicle, it's actually Delhi government is giving you a subsidy for buying that vehicle, simply also because there's no manufacturing in Delhi, and also because of the fact that Delhi's got the highest AQI levels in the country. Now, when you look at, we've done various permutation and combinations of how conversion is going to happen from IC to electric. At what stage are we really going to shift? So even though there are a number of projections which talk about 100% or 80% by 2030, we looked at first 2025 and then 2030. So in 2026 now, which is the 5-year rolling plan that we have, even those numerous projections talk about a larger number, we've only looked at a very base case scenario of 20% conversion. That does the business make sense even at 20% conversion? For 2030, we looked at this at about 50%. And even then, this business makes ample sense, because when you're looking at 20% penetration, up from 150,000 units right now, we are looking at the market converting up to 4 million units, 40 lakh units by 2026. 250 billion rupees is going to be the total turnover of this industry by 2026. And out of that, 30% is actually going to be B2B. So all your deliveries, all your Zomatos and Amazons and everything. And out of that, at this point, in the base case scenario, we are anticipating a minimum number of 1 million vehicles coming in out of Hero Electric stable. Now, this on the right side, the chart is basically to show you the low speed versus city speed. And I've got a pyramid, which I'll show you after this. So what we've got here is on the left side is the pyramid, is the current IC engine pyramid in India. 20 million vehicles sold every year. Out of that, 85% of them are the commuter segment or the entry-level segment up to a price point of 90,000 rupees. The central pyramid, which is the smaller one, is last year. So where about 150,000 vehicles were sold. Now, with these 150,000 vehicles, a large part of them were actually the entry-level vehicles or the low-speed vehicles. There are two categories as per the government. There's low speed and high speed, but we have defined it into three categories: a low speed, a city speed, and a high speed. A city speed vehicle is a low speed is below 25 kilometers an hour. A city speed is about 45 to 50 kilometers an hour. And high speed is anything over that. So about 60, 70 kilometers an hour for electric. Now, when you consider the city speed category, that's only about 30% right now. But what we anticipate is this category is actually going to grow up in the next couple of years. So this is going to become the predominant category. Another factor is that anybody who's buying an electric vehicle at this point, IC engine vehicle, at about an entry level or a commuter segment at 70 or 75,000 rupees, he's not going to buy a electric vehicle at 1,20,000 or 1,30,000 or 1,50,000. So he's going to want to stay within a 10 to 15% band of where he is, where he's currently at. So when we look at our product range, we've got vehicles in the comfort category, which is the low speed category, city speed, and high speed is something that we're going to be launching soon. That's also a very small category. Now, when you consider the total cost of ownership, that's a very important factor. So when you look at it over a 6-year period, 50 kilometers a day, if you're using electric, or if you're using a two-wheeler, electric vehicles are on the first two and the second two. So on the first two are low speed and city speed, where the initial purchase price is down to about 65,000 rupees. And the running cost, when you take all that into account, over a 6-year period for 50 kilometers a day, is only about 1,15,000 in total. That includes your battery replacement, that includes your power that you're going to be consuming, and the service costs that you're going to be incurring. In the center is actually electric, but those are the higher speed electric vehicles. There, the initial purchase price is high, the battery replacement cost is very high, and they lose the TCO when it comes to parity as against IC engine vehicles. And on the right side, the three vehicles are IC engine vehicles. We've got 110 and 100 cc scooters and motorcycles. So you can see that the graph goes up dramatically when it comes to IC engine versus electric. And in electric, the city speed and low speed actually are the ones which are going to be the mainstay. We believe city is going to be the mainstay going forward. If you're using the same vehicles over for 30 kilometers a day for 6 years, how does it pan out in terms of the cost of running per day? So electric vehicle costs you anything from 12 rupees to 17 rupees, whereas even public transport will cost you about anything from 60 rupees to 80 rupees. And when you look at an IC engine vehicle, it's probably going to cost you about 60 rupees per day, considering that you're using less than 1 liter of fuel to make this commute. So from a initial purchase price, which I showed you about 63,000, 65,000, and then your TCO, the cost of running these vehicles is much lower. Now, let me come to Hero Electric, the company that I actually head. So I am the managing director of Hero Electric. I'm also the president of SMEV, which is the EV association in India. Now, we started actually our journey about 2000. We introduced electric vehicles, electric bicycles at that point of time. Didn't work, reintroduced in 2004, again didn't work. And then in 2007, we introduced our scooters, and that's when the market really began to take off. Since then, we've seen a lot of ups and downs, but we've continued to push forward. we've been growing rapidly over the last number of years. So we've gone from 30,000 to 37,000, 46,000, and now 54,000 in 2021 last year. This year, we're looking at doubling over the previous year, in spite of what is happening right now with the country in terms of the COVID, etc. So there is substantial growth that we've already seen and substantial growth that we're going to see going forward. We have about a 42% market share in the market right now. So what we've been able to use is the Hero brand, which is extremely strong and consider in the country, so everybody knows that, and married that with electric to project actually a green mobility brand. Now, another interesting factor that we've got is that we have about 6 platforms for vehicles, and on top of that, we've got about 13 models. Now, each of these platforms, all of them have lithium-ion batteries, and these are portable batteries for across the product range, and a single battery that we're using across the entire product range. So depending on what kind of a user you are, you could have 1 battery, 2 batteries, or 3 batteries in your vehicle, giving you a range of anything from 60 kilometers to up to 210 kilometers. And speed of comfort speed of 25 kilometers going upwards to about 50 kilometers an hour speed. Different segments are being targeted through these vehicles. So we've got Flash at the entry level, we've got Atria at the comfort speed high-end category, and Nix is targeted only at the B2B segment. And then we've got Xeon and Optima is the best-selling EV in India for the past many years. And then we've got Photon. So while we work on all of this, we have a dedicated network for sales. So we've got about 450 dealers, which are exclusive to us, 250 sub-dealers. And while we have all of this, we are creating an ecosystem around them of service centers. So we've got a concept called PGO, Preferred Garage Owner, where we've already trained about 6,000 of these roadside mechanics to fix our vehicles. These people, so for any first-hand, you have a tire puncture, you have any other small issues, they are the ones who you would go to. Now, when it comes to the factors like charging infrastructure, we've also been creating that. Already installed about 1,600 charging stations around the country. And that's a number which we're going to take up to 20,000. Knowing very well that the customers are not really using it to that extent at this point, because they have a range of anything 60 to 80 kilometers on the vehicle and going upwards to 210 kilometers. So they don't really need to charge on a day-to-day basis when they're out. But this is only for topping up. Now, in terms of the dealer, our return on capital employed, if you've been a dealer with us for about 3 years, your capital employed, your return is about 44%, which is actually very healthy. This is just some marketing stuff that we're doing. I'll skip through all of this. So to sum up, the tailwinds, we've got very strong tailwinds going. So there is government factors, the government policy, state and central both, changing customer mindset, this traction in the ecosystem. There's a lot of companies now which earlier were not actually not deploying any capital in this sector, are now deploying capital, are willing to deploy capital. The battery prices, which I've already spoken about, are declining, and the customer awareness is increasing. While everything is good and there is a push at the back, there are strong tailwinds, there are headwinds as well. Awareness is still not very good when it comes to across the country. Financing is still dear. Policies, though they are there, which are pushing electric mobility through, are not necessarily completely favorable at this point of time. And there is a mismatch of expectations versus performance in some customers. But customers who've understood this have really taken on to electric in a very large manner, in a very meaningful manner. These are just some of our certifications. We are a UN CDM project certified. We are one of the only EV companies in the country, and actually even in Asia, which is the SA 8000 certified. And then our building actually is a platinum green building. Code Green is something that we do, which is a part of our CSR, where we talk about issues with the environment and how do we address them, etc. So that's it for me. Thank you so much. I would be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Munjal. It's really it's a preview of what is already there and what is going to really grow into very large numbers, and it was brilliantly presented. So thank you for that. Now, moving on to the questions. The first question is that in terms of how you view the composition of the ecosystem over the next 5 years, you have talked about it like charging infrastructure or the batteries, but from the entrepreneurial standpoint, because there are a lot of Jito Youth Wing members attending here, over 800 of those. So if you can just share your view on how would the ecosystem look like, and what are the ways in which the entrepreneurs can come in and create their own ventures to be a part of this supply chain or the ecosystem.
Thank you, Ajay. Very valid question. See, if you look at it, the ecosystem for electric mobility at this point of time is actually negligible. Whether you look at it from a charging infrastructure standpoint, you look at it from a swapping infrastructure standpoint, or you look at the supply chains, the manufacturers. So everything, it's a wide open field right now. And depending on what scale you're looking at, whether it's a mechanical or electrical or plastics or anything else that you're looking at, or even services. I mean, there are a number of companies which are already looking at services whether it's a shared mobility, or they're looking at battery as a service, or they're looking at charging as a service, or they're looking at IoT, etc. So this whole ecosystem has yet to be created. If you consider what has happened in the IC industry in the last 40 years, where that whole ecosystem got created, where the mechanics, the petrol pumps, and the whole everything else that came in and then came CNG. So in electric, at this point, it's very, very nascent. So we don't really have a very wide ecosystem right now. It's what we are creating as companies, and that's all there is. So there are opportunities, whether you look at manufacturing of components, the vehicles themselves, the batteries, the drivetrain, the motors, etc., wire harnesses, there's IoT. That's a very, very big area that's going to be there, because these vehicles essentially are going to be connected vehicles. So electric is going to be more connected than what IC has ever been. And there are huge opportunities there, whether it is charging infrastructure that you're looking at, or whether you're even looking at something like a swapping infrastructure, which may not work for cars as much, but it may work for three-wheelers, for example. It may work for two-wheelers, but more so for B2B applications at this point of time. So there are opportunities across the whole spectrum. Reskilling is going to be required of the workforce, which is already there working in the IC industry. They will just have to be reskilled to handle this part of the business as well.
Sure. Now, before Harshita comes in and she asks certain other questions which the audience has asked, but you have mentioned that Hero Electric, you have 1,600 charging stations right now, and you plan to grow it to 20,000. So in terms of that ecosystem, are there any entrepreneurs which can play the role? And if yes, what would it take, or how do you view it as Hero Electric?
See, actually, that's a business which should not be run by the OEM themselves. That's a business where a service provider needs to actually come in and install that charging infrastructure. So we are doing it because there's nobody else who's been doing it earlier, and we're doing it for the convenience of our customers. But at the same time, we also realize that there's not so much money to be made on that ecosystem at this point of time, till the density of vehicles increases. So what we are doing is the charging infrastructure, for example, that we are installing is open to everybody, because we are looking at this as an industry growth. We are not just only looking at it from a company growth, but the industry has to grow, and then the company will grow with that. So yes, there are opportunities for people to set up charging infrastructure. And like I said in my first slides, that the charging infrastructure requirements of two-wheelers versus four-wheelers is very, very different. For four-wheelers, it's going to be high-capacity chargers, etc., and there's heavy investment there. But for two-wheelers, when it comes down to it, it's a very basic charging infrastructure that is required, but very dense charging infrastructure. So more than actually, another thing that could actually work in this is where the government enforces policy to say that every new building which is coming up, whether it's commercial or residential or whatever be the case, they have to have charging infrastructure on the ground floor. That would also help to that extent.
Sure. And just to connect the dots between what you have said that the electrical vehicle growth would initially in the first phase would happen from B2B. So for example, let's say pizza deliveries or the e-commerce companies who would get those electrical vehicles on one hand. On the other hand, you have said the entrepreneurial opportunities could be battery as a service, or swapping infrastructure as a service, or IoT, because compared to IC or combustion engines, EVs are more connected vehicles, and therefore if there are entrepreneurs who create IoTs the sensors and all, and they can create that system to cater to the business houses like Amazon's or their delivery centers or pizza deliveries. So on one hand, you as the manufacturer would create those vehicles, and these would be the entrepreneurial ecosystem which will facilitate towards that journey for the country as such, if we have understood it right from the standpoint of our audience.
To an extent. So some of it is to an extent. B2B is still a small part right now. In total, the B2B market for any company, for us also, it's less than 10% at this point of time. But that is something that is going to grow up to about 33 to 35% in the next couple of years. But in B2B also, there are a lot of opportunities. For example, when you look at the companies that you've just named, whether it's Zomato's or Amazon's or any of these guys, they are aggregators. They work on an aggregator model. They don't really have the vehicles themselves. So if there are NBFCs there is an opportunity for the NBFCs actually to get the vehicles or to finance the vehicles on a lease model for the riders or the users of these vehicles from for B2B. IoT is a very big area when it comes to B2B. It's not so big when it comes to B2C. B2C, the customers are still not adopting IoT to that extent. But when it comes to B2B, you need full IoT on the vehicle and you need full connectivity on the vehicle in order to be able to track it at all points of time. So yes, there are opportunities there.
Sure, brilliant. Harshita ji, over to you.
Yes, I would just like to ask a few questions that have come up from the chat. So one of the questions is, what are the major infrastructural changes that will be needed for the maximum penetration of the electric vehicles? And what will happen to the diesel and the petrol driven cars? Would the market coexist or would it diminish?
See, what's going to happen is, it's a very valid question. There's going to be a change that happens. So there's going to be, you're going to see one. So you may not, going forward, let's see, in the next couple of years, now it's anybody's guess whether that's going to happen in the next 2 years or 3 years or 5 years or 7 years. You're going to see growth reducing for the IC engine vehicles. I'm talking more about two-wheelers here. So in electric, because there is so much parity, and I showed you the chart earlier, where the pricing, initial purchase price has come down, the running cost is lower than that of IC engine vehicle. And now penetration is what is important. So as this market increases, there is going to be cannibalization that happens. A large part of it is going to eat into what is there in the IC industry at this point of time. And a large part of it is going to be a completely new industry, because in electric, you've got the low speed category, which can cater to segments which are not being able to cater by the IC industry. They can't cater to that segment. And so there would be new segments also getting created. So this industry will eat a little bit into that, yes.
Thank you. So you have talked about some of the government policies and advances in the battery tech and everything. So what are the white spaces in this ecosystem? What are the government policies? If you could just enlighten, or the battery advances, the tech advances that have taken place in the EV industry.
See, the two different topics. Let me address the government policies first. So government, there is a huge amount of push by the government, both at the center level and the states level, for various reasons. One of it is oil dependency. The other one is actually the AQI levels that we have, the pollution that we have in the air, and PM 2.5 and PM 10. So these are huge factors when it actually hits us. Then you do need electric vehicles, because tailpipe emissions actually reduce and when you look at it from an urban standpoint, over 50% of the pollution on the roads actually or the air is actually from vehicles, IC engine vehicles. So that needs to be taken away. Other part of it is from construction dust and other sectors. But nevertheless, vehicles play a very important role. So one, government needs to push electric mobility through and set goals in order to say that, by which time do we need to convert to electric? So then the planning can happen accordingly in that manner. That's one part of it. While the government has given a push, there is no deadline to say that by such and such date, you have to convert all vehicles to electric at this point of time. I don't know whether they'll do that or not. They've done that in numerous other countries, but in India, we don't have any such thing right now. The second is the advancements in battery technologies. So what's happening is that in the last, like I said, the battery prices have been dropping. So earlier we had lead acid batteries, which was the predominant market, which was the predominant product in the market. And that's been changing from there to lithium ion, because the price gap between the two has been dropping. And the performance of lithium is much better, of course. Also, what happens is with the lithium, the battery size is smaller, the portability of the battery, so it's only about 10 kilos for us, the batteries that we're using. Plus the charge time and the durability of the battery is much, much better than what it was lead acid. And even after you've used a lead acid lithium ion battery in your vehicle, it doesn't really go away into waste or anything of that sort. It goes into stationary applications and remains there for a long time and then gets recycled. So the life of the battery is a lot longer. What is going to happen is this chemistry has already changed dramatically in the last 10 years or even in the last 3 years. So there is a lot of R&D work which is going in. There's a lot of money which is being thrown into this sector in terms of what is going to be the next chemistry. What we anticipate, the next battery that's going to come out will actually be a solid state battery. And these solid state batteries, once they come out, their life of the battery is much as much as 150,000 cycles, 1.5 lakh cycles. So they can last many, many, many years before and it doesn't decline in terms of performance the way the other batteries do. So the battery chemistry is going to continue changing. As we've seen, even with our cell phones, as we've seen our smartphones and computers, over the last 5 years versus now, there's a dramatic change in terms of the performance, in terms of the chipset that we've got, in terms of the the battery life, etc., and the size and portability of the computers and smartphones. The same thing is happening in electric mobility also. It's the same battery which is getting changed. So you will see a huge amount of advancements in the next couple of years.
You talked about lithium battery, the recycling of lithium battery. So what sort of other, entrepreneurs can take up from the recycling of these lithium batteries in the future? Businesses.
See, what would happen is that these batteries, once they go out of automotive, once they're taken out of two-wheelers and everything, what happens is that in the two-wheeler vehicle, for example, the stress on the battery is a lot. So once it's finished its life cycle here, which could be in 4, 5, 6 years, whatever be the case, after that, the battery is not finished actually, but it's not okay for this application. So they would go into things like UPSs and inverters and all of these other solutions, where we actually right now use lead acid batteries, or we use batteries which have to be topped up, and they have to be maintained and service done on a regular basis, etc. That's not the case with lithium. They would in some cases get disassembled and be used in smaller applications as well. So they would go into, I believe a lot of them will actually go into stationary applications.
Thank you. So considering the future for the electric vehicles, so what advice would you like to give the OEM manufacturers dedicated totally to the IC engine components?
So my advice to them would be that, depending on what kind of sector that you're coming in from, if you're coming in from mechanical, that's not going to change really, because the same mechanical is required in electric as well. So if you're coming in from suspension parts, or if you're coming in from wheels and tires and shock absorbers and those kind of things, those don't really change. The ones that get affected are more to do with fuel tanks, more to do with the engines and the drivetrains, because that drivetrain is going to change. But even that change, there is reskilling that can be done. You can look at a different model. For example, somebody who's manufacturing a fuel tank at this point of time, even if it's for cars, that fuel tank, they are specialists in manufacturing these tanks which go into very compact spaces or very difficult spaces. They can be used actually for coolant injection into the batteries, because batteries actually have coolants running through when it comes to cars. In two-wheelers, it's air cooled, but there it's liquid cooled in larger vehicles. Companies, for example, which are manufacturing engines and fine blank components, etc., they could look at even motor manufacturing. They could look at anything which is, where the tolerances are very low as compared to what they are manufacturing at this point of time. So what we believe is that the effect on the industry is going to be minimal, provided you start planning well in advance. You know that there is disruption going to happen. You know the market is going to convert. So you need to start reskilling, and you need to start looking at investments in that manner. I don't think there's going to be too many. If you look at even in the past, when disruption has happened, we had e-commerce companies come in. We've had shared mobility companies come in, really. When these companies have come in, unemployment hasn't really increased to that extent, because people reskill themselves. There is an opportunity for people to reskill.
Thank you so much.
That's an amazing.
So these are Q&A questions. Over to you, Ajay ji, for.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Munjal. It was an amazing session, and we learned so much, including me. I'm an engineer, so the way you explained and overall presentation was amazing. One of the best ones I've heard on electric vehicle. Really appreciate your time and look forward to having more such sessions with our Jito Youth Week. Thank you, sir. Yes. With that, if you can just hold on, Mr. Munjal, if you can just hold on, we have a special guest, and Dr. Raskar, we have a special guest. If I may introduce Mr. Anurag Jain. He's IAS, and he is with us today. Mr. Anurag Jain, if you can please unmute yourself. Yes, and Dr. Raskar, Mr. Anurag Jain, we had met at the PMO while Anurag ji sir was the joint secretary at the PMO. Jain sir, welcome. Right. And he is those of you who do not know, he is from IIT Kharagpur and MS from the US. And IS has served in various places. Jandhan was his brainchild, and sir has been instrumental to do a lot of things in various capacities. Welcome, sir. Dr. Raskar, you already know from MIT, then Mr. Munjal here, and our youth wing. So today we had over 9 people joining in. If you can just share some of your thoughts, Anurag sir.
Thank you. Both the talks were extremely interesting. Actually, when you sent me the link, looking at the topic itself, I told you that I would like to listen to both of them. And I must thank Dr. Raskar and Mr. Munjal, both of them, for very interesting speeches. And I'm sure that all the members of the GPO would have been benefited.
Yes, sure. So we have Mr. Dheeraj Chajed, who is the chairperson. So, sir, we look forward to doing one session. We will discuss that as a follow-up, and we will learn from you. But thank you again for joining. It's really an honor for us, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Harshita ji.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Raskar and Mr. Munjal, for enlightening us with your knowledge. Lastly, I would just like to request Mr. Rajat Jain, Secretary of Jito Youth Wing, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Arshita. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and Sadar Jai Jinendra to all. What a lovely conclusion to our first event in the JPF iBox series. I am Rajat Jain, Secretary Jito Youth Wing, and I am grateful to be proposing the vote of thanks for today's event. As we are surrounded by pandemic havoc, let me just begin by thanking Almighty God for keeping us safe and enabling us to attend this event. I would like to extend my special thanks to our dynamic speakers of the evening, Mr. Ramesh ji and Mr. Naveen ji, whose insights have given us a new perspective and helped us scale our knowledge. Warm acknowledgement to the person and his team, without whose vision and dedication today's event wouldn't be possible. Thank you, Ajay ji, Milind ji, and the entire JPF team for providing Jito Youth Wing the opportunity of collaborating with you in this project. Special thanks to the entire Jito Youth Wing Apex team, the Youth Wing zone conveners, the chapter team. Thank you, Praveen ji. Thank you, Dheeraj ji. Thank you, JPF youth team, our convener, Samyukta, our co-convener, Harshita ji. Last but not the least, thank you for all your participation and support. Please stay home, stay safe. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And just to